You are listening to Mind Over Me, the mental wellness podcast with me, Scott Carter. I am a licensed therapist and someone who is very mindful and aware of the decline in our collective. I created this podcast so that we could have more direct and honest about difficult topics, and it's my goal to have honest but direct conversations that we need to have. It's also my goal to give my listeners the information that they need in order to find their own mental health. And this is where you will find the information that you need to be your. And of course, all of this is based on years of clinical experience. Thank you for being here. All right, welcome, everybody. This is Mind Over Me. My name's Scott. As you heard in the introduction, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to tell all your friends how great this podcast is, how helpful it is, how useful it is in regards to your well-being, your mental health, and all of that. Hopefully, please. As usual, it would just be very much appreciated. Today, we're going to talk about yet another one of those reasons why, as a whole, we are collectively mentally unwell. I want to start it all off by maybe providing a reminder, because I feel like maybe we need a lot of them, that we're not supposed to live this way. There is something terribly, terribly wrong with the way that we live. We're not built or wired to live the way that we live in this society, in this culture. I know for me, just as an individual, when I have sought out my own mental wellness, I just wanted to be less depressed, honestly. I wanted to just be okay in my own skin. And then when I felt a whole lot better, I realized that I had to keep going because you don't arrive to mental wellness, you maintain it, you sustain it. Just like your physical health, you don't get physically healthy and go, okay, I can stop now. You always have to maintain it. The same thing goes for your mental health. So I was actually having this conversation last night with my mom. Bless her heart, love her to bits, appreciate everything she's done for me. Almost 83 years old. My mom's going to be 83 soon. Still pretty mentally sharp for her age, which is pretty great, which is really good for her. Well, I mean, it's great for everybody involved, of course. I'm glad she's doing as well as she is, but she's always baffled when she hears that people are struggling with something like anxiety. I just don't get it. I just don't understand. I thought they were doing so well. I don't know how many times I've had to have this conversation with her where I'm like, Mom, people are really good at putting on a mask and covering it up and showing you what you want to hear. When people are struggling with some sort of mental illness or mental health issue, we attach it to them. We label them. You're bad. You have a problem. You're flawed. You're defective. Well, while the rest of us pretend like everything's great? Come on now. But I told her, I said, our lifestyle, our modern lifestyle is not supportive, not conducive for good mental well-being. It's just not. But our environmental factors play a huge, huge, huge part in our overall well-being, on our mental well-being. But think of it this way. If you put a whole bunch of we have zoo animals. If all the zoo animals were killing themselves because of how miserable they were, we'd be like, maybe we shouldn't put them in zoos. The environment here is bad. But from what I've heard, a lot of animals actually do really poorly in zoos. Bears, for example, I've heard do really poorly in zoos. They exhibit a bunch of behaviors that makes it look like they're depressed. Like bears seem depressed. They don't want to live in a habitat, and who can blame them? They want to be out in the open wilderness. This is a phenomenon known as zoochosis, okay? When animals show abnormal behaviors for that animal when they're confined to a zoo. And I want to put it this way as well, right? If you had a fish tank and the water was really dirty and the water was really filthy and gross, and the fish were sick and not doing well and dying, you wouldn't medicate the fish or blame the fish or, man, those fish really need to get it together. You would say this environment is terrible for the fish. It needs to be cleaned up. The environment, the right? The environmental factors are making these fish sick. But when it comes to humans, right, we're always labeling the humans. That you should do better. You should be able to function here. You should thrive here. Shoulds and supposed to be's. And we're not doing enough to look at the environmental factors. When I started looking at life through the lens of with the belief that everything seems to be designed to be the opposite of what we need and what's good for us, then everything started to make a hell of a lot more sense to me. And maybe a separate episode could be the things that we're supposed to be doing, like things that are good for us. But as I'm observing humans these days, clients and just humans in general, so many of them are glomming onto the things that are just bad for them. And the things that are bad for them will often feel good in the moment, good momentarily, right? And that's why they do them. Oh, it feels good now. It must be good. But things that are actually good for you, they're going to feel good later. And you're just going to be healthier, right? And perhaps it would be helpful to rattle off item after item after item about what is wrong with our lifestyle and why it's working against us. This one, to me, is without a doubt one of the biggest factors of all, overall across the board. And as I'm sitting here mentally processing this topic about human emotion and or just the emotional human connection, right? Intimate connections with other humans. In my mind, I can already hear what a lot of people out there on the internet would have to say about this topic, because of how many of them have been convinced that humans are bad, human relationships are bad, people are only going to harm you. Other people are, and so many people, especially the younger generations, man, they look at other human beings as bad. And too many of them just have this attitude of I don't want anything to do with them. I don't want anything to do with other people. Because of course this issue comes through my office. It comes through with my clients, mostly with young people, young adults and teenagers. I hear this. And of course, it's not a coincidence that in every single case of that, in every single instance where this person feels like, I hate people, I don't want anything to do with people, people are bad, people are awful, relationships are bad, this group of people is awful, that group of people is awful. Not a coincidence. Not at all a tiny bit of coincidence that same exact person is profoundly miserable. They're anxious, they're depressed, they're lonely, they're isolated. They basically spend all day staring at their phones, as much time as they can staring at their phones. And there's a cycle or pattern of behaviors or a cluster of behaviors that I'm noticing when it comes to the more time people spend on their phones, the more isolated they are, the more anxious and depressed they are, the more detached from reality they are. That might be a whole other topic I should do. I feel like that's important to talk about. The number of people that think they have this totally objective and completely accurate grasp on life and relationships and other people in the world around them when they're not out living it. When they're only living life through a digital portal, aka their phone. I'm still trying to find a nice tactful way of saying to them, I'm just gonna say what I want to say here, though I don't say it. But what I want to say is, you don't have any idea what's actually going on out there. You think you do. You don't. You don't know what's going on out there. You think you know what people are like. You think you know what relationships are like. You don't. You don't know what they're like. You think you do, but you don't. But if you're anything like me and you've fully recognized how important human relationships are, deep human connection is, and then you look at the types of stuff on social media, just the war between the sexes, for example, or just the war between groups, and just the general angst and contempt that other people have for other people. I mean, it's wild. Not to mention, there's, it's I'm on social media only because I'm trying to promote my business. I'm trying to promote myself as a right? As a therapist, as a practitioner, I'm self-employed. Social media is basically free advertising. My online activity on X is a relatively new thing. I'm continually astounded, absolutely staggered as to what a toxic wasteland that platform is an absolute toxic wasteland. And I'm even like really, really careful about the type of content I want to see or cultivate or respond to. And I can't help but notice the amount of media that's published. One of the creators that she's not a creator, but she's a influencer, I guess. I follow her on X, and she's always kind of commenting about the negativity that's out there that is directly targeting human relationships, painting human relationships as bad, as harmful, as destructive in your life, and that happiness is to be found in loneliness and isolation and doing you and only pursuing your happiness. It's impossible for me to ignore just the enormous, absolute enormous amount of media, print out there that seems to be trying to isolate people from other people. I personally can't help but wonder that they do that because then they know they're more likely to sell subscriptions or get more views or attention. I mean, because if you're out enjoying time with friends, you're not going to be looking at their social media content or reading the magazine or whatever. But now it's hard not to notice the general attitudes now that people have towards other people, the general attitudes that they have towards relationships. What's troubling is you see a lot more people who look at other people just as a resource to be exploited, right? What can I get from this person? What can I get them to do for me? Like, it's true. It's really disturbing, actually. It's quite disturbing to see the sheer number of people who look at others and look at relationships, whether it's friendship or romantic relationships, with the attitude of, what can I get from that person? I'm going to use them. I'm going to pretend to like them. I'm going to use them up, take what I can from them, get whatever I can from them, before I quickly discard them and then make them look like the villain. Relationships, again, romantic or otherwise, have become purely transactional. Again, mostly amongst young people. I mean, I'm 47. I enjoy very high quality friendships. I intentionally seek out people who are just good to people, that are just good people, who understand the need for that human connection. I am very quick to walk away from any relationship that seems disingenuous or exploitive in nature or is just taken on a negative connotation. And for me, again, I do a lot of work with teenagers, man. I do a lot of work with young people. What really bothers me, what really troubles me is that I see these young people who have gotten this shit put into their head, this absolute garbage, toxic garbage that's been put into their heads about other people and about relationships. And I feel like those things have been put into their heads by people who mean them harm. And then I'm over here like, hey, that's not what it's really like. And then they treat me like I'm the villain, right? Like, how dare you question me, and it's like, I'm not the one trying to dupe you over here. I'm trying to guide you to a life that's more connected, where you're more connected and you're more fulfilled. The lack of deep human connection is one of our fundamental needs. I'm absolutely convinced of it. This is just one of our psychological and spiritual needs. This is one thing that we need. We need it. Humans have arguably survived as long as they have because they work together, because they have come together and learned how to work very well together. And as soon as they collectively start seeing each other as their enemy, how long does that last before everything just falls apart? Because it's falling apart. Things are falling apart. Actually, I'm sitting here and I realize that I might need to clarify something here. Human connection is a need, not the lack of it. I went back and listened to it. human connection, human intimacy is one of our core psychological and spiritual needs. It's also what helps us survive. Our culture has also elevated this lone wolf idea that you're just better alone. And granted, I support self-reliance, mostly in the idea that you need to learn to support yourself first. Don't rely on other people to support you. Nobody's going to be able to care enough about you that you need them to. No one's going to be able to care about you as much as you can or should care about yourself. No one's going to care about your safety as much as you will. No one's going to care about your well-being as much as you're going to care about it. Care about yourself more than other people care about you. That doesn't mean you're better than other people. That doesn't mean you're more deserving of certain things than other people. And as a general rule, humans need meaningful connections. Okay? Without meaningful connections, we can't feel fulfilled. We can't feel happy. You can't experience true happiness as long as you are disconnected. You're disconnected from life, disconnected from anything meaningful, disconnected from purpose. But again, probably the most important connection that we need in life is with other human beings. And again, I find it to be absolutely no coincidence that those who strongly disagree with me, because I get this online, people push back with this. People are always resisting. And again, it's not a coincidence that those people who disagree with me just so happen to be extremely miserable, anxious, depressed, isolated, and totally disconnected in life. So, if extracting human relationships out of your life and cutting them out entirely, right, is the answer to happiness, why are you so miserable? I've talked about happiness in the past. It's different from what people think it is. They look for it in different places. I think a lot of people these days think that happiness is just getting what you want. That's not even close. That's not even close. People who get everything they want tend to be spoiled. I think I did a whole episode on this a few weeks back. Go check it out if you'd like. And just as a side note, for anyone and everyone out there if you're seeking happiness or fulfillment in your life, I hope and pray that you do not get everything that you want, at least not without earning it or sacrifice. Because that really is the key, right? The key is to earn it and to make sacrifices for it. Otherwise, it ruins you. You become spoiled. You become rotten. And honestly, it is sad when you think about it. It's sad to know that we live in a time where it's almost like the popular attitude, the mainstream attitude is that human associations are bad, that people are bad. You should only get involved with people if you're getting something out of it, if you're personally getting something out of it. And as usual, as a side note too, my podcast is all about personal accountability, looking at ourselves. So this is all about looking at yourself. Like, do I hold this attitude? Do I regard people this way? Do I treat relationships and other people as though it's supposed to do things for me? And I'm unhappy with a relationship if the person's not doing something. We got to look at ourselves. That's what I'm getting at. You have to ask yourself these questions. Our shadow work journal prompts, by the way, at the end of this episode, here in a little bit, are going to be about relationships. We're going to dive into attitudes and beliefs and fears about relationships, human connection. So stay tuned for that. We'll get there soon. First, I want to talk about what I believe are a couple of the biggest barriers that keeps people from seeking connection with other human beings. This is life according to me. This is the problem according to me. This is based on my perceptions, my opinions, my professional opinions, based on my interactions with clients, other human beings, especially teenagers and young people. As best as I can tell, there are two major problems going on here. They're related. And so, of course, as usual, I'm going to place the focal point of blame and the problem on technology and social media. It's just becoming glaringly obvious these days that social media has a way of really distorting people's version of reality. Now, mental illness often is centered around an inaccurate perception of what reality actually is, right? So there's what you think the world actually is, and then there's what the world actually is, right? What you think it is versus what it really is. Okay, so the gap between those two is what we call a cognitive dissonance, and for some people the dissonance is huge, it's massive, they're worlds apart, and some people it's a lot smaller. And honestly, like, I find that people do a lot better when they deal with reality instead of like a contrived, conceived, distorted sense of reality. What I've noticed is that when people spend a lot of time online, on social media, there is a much higher distorted idea in their mind of what is actually going on out in the world. I mean, if you stay home all the time and you're just on social media rather than living your life, right? And suddenly your life is lived through this digital portal, you're just not going to have an accurate depiction of life, right? I already mentioned this in this episode. I think it's so important to be more aware in our personal situations at the impacts and the effects of social media, technology, how it's changing how we think, our attitudes, how it changes our perception of life and reality. So people are adopting a certain set of attitudes and narratives, stories about people, what people are like, what relationships are like, what the world is like. Those stories can also be very selfish stories. Like, there's a lot going on out there in terms of entitlement. People believing that the world owes them things, that they deserve certain things out of life. And so they're like incredibly bitter at the world because they're not getting the things that they think that they're owed when they're not owed those things. It's becoming obvious that the more time that people spend on social media and online, the more negative view they have towards other human beings. They seem to tend to think that all human beings are certain ways. All human beings are evil, nefarious, selfish, harmful, abusive, etc. Frankly, there's just a whole cluster of negative attitudes, negative beliefs, and even a whole paradigm structure. Right? Paradigm, like if you're kind of zooming out, instead of looking at a few trees, you're looking at the whole forest. Right? That's belief versus paradigm. But again, there's often an entire cluster of attitudes and beliefs about other people and relationships that are just frankly really, really, really distorted. It's much easier to convince people of these distorted views rather than convince them that their views are distorted. I tend to blame most of our social problems on social media. But it's just obvious when you look at the data that right around the time that we introduced smartphones and social media, right, and putting them into the palms of, your hand. And then, I still remember when teenagers were getting iPhones. It was crazy. It was like, how is a teenager getting an iPhone now? Most of them have iPhones now. But there's an obvious decline in everything good, all mental health, right? An obvious deterioration as soon as, smartphones were widely distributed and people had access to the internet using their phones. People went from interacting in person to just scrolling on social media. Social media was supposed to bring us closer together, supposed to enhance and improve our social interactions. Over a long period of time, they've made them exponentially worse. People are far more disconnected than they've ever been. A lot of people hold on to the myth. It's a total myth that their relationships on social media and technology are just as enriching as if they would be in person. That's just false. That's just not true. Honestly, I think that's a lie that people tell themselves so that they can avoid vulnerability. Because interacting with people, like the social anxiety, right, has spiked exponentially, and people want to avoid things that make them anxious. So they use a lot of things as an excuse of like, oh, I just interact with people online. And yes, it's the same thing. No, it's not. It's absolutely not the same thing. And as a result of all of this, this is the second thing, this is the second major barrier that I see with people in their relationships is the fear of vulnerability, being emotionally vulnerable with people. I see people who have the attitude that it's like, well, that makes me feel really vulnerable, so I'm just going to avoid it. Okay, but all of us have had to, like, all people have had to face and deal with the vulnerability that comes with connecting with other people, that just comes with the territory. The trouble is that too many people just equate vulnerability to pain. Vulnerability always equals pain. Or people look at discomfort. They never want to be uncomfortable. Discomfort is a wise teacher. Discomfort is good for you. In many regards, discomfort is the only way to grow or succeed in life. And unfortunately, again, I'm going to blame technology and social media for this one. A lot of these young people seem to believe that they can just stay home with their digital virtual portal to the world, and that life will come to them, that life will find them, relationships, success, jobs, money, those things will come to them. And obviously a lot of them think that it's the result of luck. It just happens to happen rather than a set of choices, deliberate choices. And rather than dealing with the discomfort that comes with vulnerability, they'd rather avoid it. So the vulnerability issue, I have a lot of thoughts on the vulnerability issue. So, I mean, I'll do a rapid fire here. Number one, remember that discomfort is good for you. Discomfort is going to help you. Your comfort zones are bad for you. If vulnerability makes you uncomfortable, then by God, you should be doing it because that's how you grow. Don't take that to mean that you should just go out there and make yourself extremely vulnerable to anybody and everybody out there. You absolutely should not. We should always be discerning, again, about who we choose to be vulnerable with. So you get to know people, observe them, ask the questions, understand them, see what they're like, watch how they treat other people, look to see how their life is going. Do they have a long, here's the deal, right? When it comes to human connection, you're going to meet people that are going to tell you, oh, I have a long history of all these crazy, horrible, abusive people in my life, and I'm such a victim, and I've just been victimized by a whole bunch of narcissists and psychopaths. You should always watch out for people who, when they tell their backstory, it's just a prolonged history of people mistreating them, because usually they're the problem. They're driving people away. They're committing a lot of relationship fouls, whether in friendship or romantic relationships or whatever the case may be. They're the ones doing that stuff. They refuse to take accountability, and so they will play the victim. You should be much more willing to be vulnerable with people who have really quality and long-standing relationships in their life. That's usually an excellent sign that that person does well with their own vulnerability as well as other people's, and that they're really good at working through problems and issues, that they're loyal, that they're patient, etc. So there are ways to discern whether or not people are worth having a real connection with. We can also work to make ourselves less vulnerable as a human being, usually by toughening up, building our strength, building our resilience, increasing how much we like ourselves and how much we support ourselves, for instances. Okay, so vulnerability isn't just this fixed, static issue that you have to battle through. But yes, some degrees of vulnerability is going to be required when it comes to close human relationships. And without those connections, you're just always going to be disconnected, depressed, anxious, and just unhappy. You're going to be miserable. Close human connection is just one of our core fundamental needs. I'm very convinced that our collective mental health would improve if more people had just close human connection, a lot more close human connections in their lives. There'd be less anxiety, less depression, and less of those things. I also wanted to mention that sometimes I hear young people talk as though having friendship is an inconvenience to other people. Or they're putting other people out by extending friendship or doing things with them or having fun with them. I'll hear young people say all the time, they'll be like, oh, I don't want to bug them. And I'm like, They need friends too, though. Guaranteed they need friends. I get just a totally false, like this big giant false reality about human relationships. Everybody wants friendship. I mean, I've truly, when I've got to know a person, I don't know that I've ever truly met anybody that wasn't like, no, I don't want any more super high quality friendships. Okay, now with all of that out of the way, let's get into our shadow work journal prompts. If you're new to my podcast, I like to do shadow work journal prompts in each episode that has to do with the topic that I covered. In this case, it's going to have to be with human connection, vulnerability, relationships, that type of thing. If you're not familiar with shadow work, this is kind of a deep psychoanalysis. Excuse me. It's how we go about discovering kind of the deep, dark parts of ourselves so that we can change them and rewire them. As usual, I would recommend doing your shadow work journal prompts and keeping a separate journal just for your shadow work journal prompts, or just a separate therapy processing journal in general. You're always going to get way more out of it if you write it down. And before I get into these journal prompts, I want to provide a very brief disclaimer. I'm a therapist. I'm not your therapist. Please move forward with using your own discretion. My shadow work is not for wimps. We do a real deep dive into our psyche to really discover what's going on in there. There's always a lot of accountability involved. You may want to include your own therapist, good therapist if you can find one, if you have a good one, and if you can find a good one, you may want to include them in the process. Okay, let's dive into these journal prompts and then we will wrap this episode up. Number 1, give yourself a letter grade about the quality of your friendships, right? From an A to an F, or maybe we'll do a number scale. Take your pick. Grade the quality of your human relationships. 1 being absolutely abysmal, 10 being as good as they can get. Okay, once you've done that, number 2 will be to examine, think about, and look at the factors in your life, your personal choices, your behavior, your attitudes, your beliefs, and you as a person that has influenced them to either be good or bad. Number 3, if you feel like your relationships, your human connections can improve, okay, what have you done to contribute them to being either low quality, high quality? And part B on that is, what can you do to change? What can you change so that your human connections are of a higher quality? And on that one, you honestly, the answer may be, I don't know. I really don't know. And that's okay. That's okay. It's okay if you don't know. What's important, if you don't know, is to ask the question, have the question on your mind, explore the question, understand that the internet is a vast place. You can find virtually any type of good information out there that you're seeking. So you may want to ask yourself, how can I be a better friend? In fact, let's make that number 4. How can I be a better friend? What can I do to improve the quality of my relationships? Number 5, on a regular basis, how disconnected am I? How disconnected do I feel? Number 6, what does it feel like to reflect on disconnection? What is that like? What do you notice? It's possible so that some difficult emotions come up. That's okay. You need to face your pain. I did a whole separate episode on that. Don't avoid difficult emotions. Face them, confront them, use them to your advantage. And as I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, man, we could really do a rabbit hole with this one. We could really carve these ones out, and they could get tough. Number 7 is going to be for those who have never really felt any deep human connection. And that would be to explore how you feel at the thought of improving that, or creating better or higher quality connections in your life. Okay, that's going to do it for this one. Another episode in the can. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. I'm going to wrap this up. Don't forget to share with your friends. Follow me on X. Go to my website, saltcitycounseling.com. Remember, my friends, you must do hard things.